Matthew says that after Jesus heard of John's death, he withdrew from there. The reason for his departure, according to Matthew, was hearing of John's death. Jesus takes this journey for more than an opportunity to mourn over John privately. Jesus travels to perform the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. This miracle is unique in the New Testament because it's the only one of Jesus' miracles reported in all 4 Gospels. He's preparing to teach his disciples a lesson. Jesus sets this scene to teach them that they must come to him for their supply in ministry. After his rejection by Israel, Jesus stops offering miracles for everyone who comes to him. The statement, Jesus had compassion, will be Matthew's clue to us when Jesus is going against his normal practice. In those moments, he will act contrary to the general pattern by healing people without demanding faith. The disciples could only see a crowd of people bringing burdens and getting in the way of Jesus' ministry. And it's because of the flock that shepherds have reason to shepherd. A shepherd's heart doesn't hold a flock's weaknesses or needs, or even their mistakes, against them. Those weaker members of the body are necessary, Paul says, because they give purpose to our spiritual gift. When you minister to people who have rough edges, you truly learn how to love someone the way Christ loves you, self-sacrificially. These disciples grew up under Pharisaic Judaism, so they naturally saw the Pharisees as their ministry role models. You can detect that sense of entitlement in their response. Tell the people to go find food for themselves. Jesus teaches these men what ministry truly requires by giving them perhaps his most powerful example of ministry. Matthew 14:16 through 21 says, "But Jesus said to them, 'They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat.' They said to him, 'We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish.' And he said, 'Bring them here to me.' Ordering the people to sit down on the grass, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food. And breaking the loaves, he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. They picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 full baskets. There were about 5,000 men who ate besides women and children. We all know this passage well. However, there is so much more to the story. Jesus handed the food to each disciple, who then carried it down the mountainside to the people in a basket. As this process continued, the groups of people ate their fill, while no one was left wanting. They knew Jesus started with only a little food, but because they're acting as waiters, they aren't present to see the miracle. They just return each time to Jesus to have their baskets filled and go back down. Jesus was teaching his disciples what serving him in the kingdom program will be like every day. Jesus taught that he supplies the miracles to his people through the hands of his servants. If Jesus' priority had been efficiency, he would have walked down the mountainside and miraculously produced a buffet line. He is intentionally distributing the food in an efficient way through the hands of his disciples to make his point. Each disciple's personal success in ministry depended on continually returning to the Lord so he could fill the basket. If the disciple returned, he came back with something to offer the people. If he didn't return to Jesus, he would have soon run out and have nothing and be useless to the people. Even after Jesus gave them a solution and the work began, they did not possess the power to perpetrate the work. Jesus was teaching the disciples that ministry is hard work. How many times did they have to walk up and down that hillside that day? Do you suppose some of them might have been complaining under their breath, can you hear Peter suggesting to Jesus, "Why don't you come down here so we don't have to make this climb so much?" There was one more lesson for the disciples and the people. He insisted that the disciples' food come from what had already been handed out to the people below. The disciples' provision came in the form of excess given to the people, so they could be blessed by blessing those who served them. It would be a good thing if the disciples in the moment learned a valuable lesson. But alas, they did not. Mark 6:52 tells us that they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their heart was hardened. If we learn from the first test, we may not have to experience it again. Thus, the difficult lesson of being caught in the turbulent Sea of Galilee had to be taught.